Oh, okay, cool. Sorry.
It's doesn't always work the first time, which is weird.
It consistently does that.
Yep. Okay. You're yeah, it's live.
Cool. So, for listeners, and there's probably only one, and maybe mostly none. Um, I've been thinking about dialectic and how we think of it, and I've realized, especially as Marxists, we're sort of thrown in the deep end with the way Marx uses dialectic because yes, commodities are real life items, but we're usually asked to do like deal more with the ideal than the material right off the bat and try to hold it in our minds. And if we don't know what we're doing with it, we just sort of make a guess if we don't know what it looks like. But in reading the philosophy of nature, especially with what we're doing with the animal organism, I've realized sort of like one one form of the dialectic is something we've already been talking about in the last couple of weeks in the manuscript, and that is the body of the animal organism. Okay, the animal organism is a life form that is made up of parts that um, are varied and differentiated, but make up our organs. And if you think about how um, Hegel talks about the organs in the animal sort of being the non-organic portion of the animal, while the unity of all of them as the animal itself is the organic portion. You begin to kind of see how the dialectic works, where the non-organic is preserved in the unity of the living being, of the living animal, right? Um, and so, um, yeah, that's a good example of how, say, the animal negates um, the life of all its parts, but at the same time preserves them as living parts, so to speak. Um, Something along those lines. And he's been trying to talk about that in the last couple of sections and sort of how the animal is put together of all the parts that that nature has built up. Okay. So we're on 391 and we were going to look at the Zusats, and the Zusats has to do with um uh okay, so we read 362 and it talks about instinct. Um Hang on just a second. Okay, sorry. I'm just going to kick it off by reading 362 because I'm totally lost as to where we were last time. It's been a busy week. So
No worries.
362,
Share
instinct. Oh, go ahead.
share your screen whenever.
Did I not? I
No.
didn't. I'm so sorry. I thought I already had. There we go.
And just to get that ready. Okay, cool.
All right. I
Yeah, this
trust you.
is I think where we're actually about. So yeah.
Yeah. So, instinct. insofar as it is directed to formal assimilation, impresses its specific nature on the details of the outer world and gives them as material in outer form appropriate to the end, leaving their objectivity untouched, as in the building of nests and other resting places. But it is a real process insofar as it individualizes inorganic things or relates itself to those already individualized and assimilates them, consuming them and destroying their specific qualities. The process of air with air, breathing and skin process with water, thirst, and with individualized earth. See, it's interesting because he just spent the last couple sections talking about what's inside animals as used by the unity of the organic animal, right, as making it up, and now he's turning out to the outer world and how we interact with um, the outer appropriate to our ends, right? So air, water, earth, so forth, life, the subject of these moments of the totality, develops inwardly a tension between itself as notion and the moments of a reality external to itself, and is a perpetual conflict in which it overcomes this externality. In this relationship, the animal comports itself as an immediate singular, and because it can only overcome single determinations of the outer world in all their variety, its self-realization is not adequate to its notion, and the animal perpetually returns from its satisfaction to a state of need. So the animal has to keep coming back for more, right? It's interesting to me that Hegel draws this line between the animal as it's not adequate to its notion, I guess you could say, through instinct. And I think this is one of the dividing lines he tries to draw between animals and ourselves. But the fact is that it's well, we're closer to that than well. Anyway, you
Well,
guys know
when
what I'm saying.
yeah, when he extends the concept of assimilation, that obviously human activity can be subsumed into that as well.
Yeah.
And of course, we can go the other direction. We're going from like identity to difference, which is
Hmm.
itself process. So,
Yeah. Mm. The animal is practically related to the outer world, and this purpose of determining is its inner urge put into action. The real process is at first a process with the elements for the outer world itself is, in the first instance, universal. The, the plant stops at this process with the elements, but the animal goes on to the process of singularity. We could also include in these processes the relation to light, for this too is an outer elemental power, but for animal and man, light as such is not the same power as it is for the plant nature. On the contrary, because man and animals see light, this self-manifestation of objective form is external to them, but in the theoretical process, their relation to it is ideal. It is only in the color of feathered creatures and on the color of animal pelts that light exerts an influence. The black hair is an effective climate of heat, blah, 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 blah. Um, yeah, and they go down and talk about markings on the skin, warmer climates, blah, blah, blah. Marked difference between the uncovered part of the what what are you doing? Plumage, sorry, and the part covered up and not in movement, so that in ravens it is in fact only uncovered part which has colored feathers, and using this as a guide, it is possible to rearrange at once in the proper order the tail feathers if they have been thrown into a heap. What's up, honey? Yeah, yeah, you can go get one. Um, material. So he goes on. They go on to light and air and water, respiratory exchange. I'm sure you guys have read through some of this. Um, venous blood. Okay, corpses. Wow. Okay, and so he digresses with this subject. And then, okay, 363, the process begins with the mechanical seizure of the external object. Assimilation itself is the conversion of the externality into the self-like unity. Pretty straightforward, eating, drinking. Since the animal is subject, unitary negativity, the nature of assimilation can be neither mechanical nor chemical, for in these processes, both the material substances and the conditions and activity remain external to each other and lack living absolute unity. Okay. So mechanical, organic, it's talking about eating. It has long been the fashion to give a mechanical explanation of the process of assimilation, as also of this circulation of blood. Another explanation is that the nerves are a series of globule, blah, blah, blah. The soul, however, is omnipresent in the body, and its ideality is such that the outer separated existence of bones, nerves, and veins has no significance for it. To assign finite relationships to life is therefore even more strikingly out of place than when, as we saw in the case of electricity, it is imagined that the process in the upper atmosphere are similar to those carried out in a laboratory. Similarly, attempts have been made to reduce digestion to a matter of pressing, pumping, and so on. But in that case, it would apply an external relationship of inner and outer, whereas the animal is the absolute self-identity of life, not a mere composition or aggregate. So he's drawing the distinction between the self-moving organism and a mechanical process that isn't really life, right? Like just just a chemical reaction, so on and so forth. Um,
Well, well, even before Hegel's day, they already had the debate going on among biologists of debate between mechanism and vitalism,
mhm.
and there have been a strong trend to mechanism since the days of Descartes. You know,
Yeah,
and 18th century Descartes, many of Descartes' followers, extended mechanistic approaches even further. So some people developed a fully mechanistic, materialist account of life, and against that, there were lots of people who were vitalists who rejected the mechanistic approach. And I think Hegel was saying, well, about both vitalism and mechanism, they're both correct and they're both incorrect.
right. They're incorrect in that they're isolated and right to the exclusion of the other, and
Yeah.
that's the wrong way to look at it.
Yeah,
And
they're
and yeah,
moments. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And this at the end, he says it in another way. The mediations which occur in the living being, like those in the meteorological process, can be followed up for some distance and demonstrated, but this kind of mediation cannot be imitated. So yes, we can do something in a laboratory that sort of looks like this, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
It's that thing in isolation, and being in isolation, it's not subject to the feedback loop of the animal organism doing it. You know what I mean?
And
Um,
the debate continues to this day. So,
yeah.
because on the one hand, on certain when molecular biology developed from like the mid 20th century on, that certainly promoted a mechanistic reductionist approach to biology.
Yeah.
And against that, people and against people like Stephen Jay Gould and
Oh,
Richard
yeah.
Lewontin and Richard Levins,
Hmm.
they all held to positions that were more like Hegel's.
Yeah.
Yeah, they drew pretty explicitly upon Hegel and Frederick Engels. But
Yeah. So, this doesn't have a number, but um, this PDF shit. So, because the living being is the universal power over its outer non-organic nature, which is opposed to it, assimilation is first the immediate fusion of the ingested material with animality, an infection with the latter, and simple transformations. Secondly, as mediation, assimilation is digestion, opposition of the subject to the outer world, and is further differentiated the process of animal water of the gastric and pancreatic lymph and so forth, and of animal fire of the gall, in which the accomplished return of the organism into itself from its concentration in the spleen is determined as being for self and as an active consuming. This is gross. Processes which uh, are all the same particularized infections. Okay. But this involvement with the outer world, the stimulus in the process itself, has likewise the determination of externality over against the universality and simple self relation of the living being. This involvement itself, therefore, constitutes, properly speaking, the object and the negative over against the subjectivity of the organism, which the latter has to overcome and digest. This inversion of attitude is the principle of the organism's reflection into self. The return into self is the negation of its outward directed activity. It has a double determination. On the one hand, the organism separates itself from itself, the activity in which its conflict with the externality of the object is manifested, and on the other, as immediately identical with this activity, it has become for itself, has in this means reproduced itself. So yeah, you've sort of got the handshake, but also the internal, you know, incorporation, assimilation of that, I guess you could say. The process outwards is thus transformed into the first formal process of simple reproduction from its own self into the uniting of itself with itself. It keeps going thanks to the assimilation. If it didn't
Yeah, it's
assimilate those outer things, well, it would have a sooner expire by date, I guess you could say. We don't eat uh, or drink soon enough, we die. Go ahead, Kyle. Sorry. Okay. Uh,
just if I had anything.
okay. Um, so the remark. The chief moment in digestion is the immediate action of life as the power over its non-organic object, which it presupposes as its stimulus only insofar as it is in itself identical with it, but is at the same time its ideality and being for self. This action is infection and immediate transformation. To it corresponds the immediate seizure of the object pointed out in the exposition of purposive activity. This immediacy with which the living being, as a universal, continues itself into its food without any further mediation. So goes down. I'm not going to read all of this, but
Get
I
back
get it.
into the teacher Hegel.
Yeah. Well, he's sort of, yeah. So down here, the syllogism of the organism is therefore not the syllogism of the external teleology, for it does not stop it directing its activity and form against the outer object, but makes this very process, which is on the point of lapsing into a mechanical and chemical one, into an object. This behavior was expounded as the second premise in the universal syllogism of purposive activity. The organism is a uniting of itself with itself in its outward process. From it, it takes and wins nothing but
Child?
Kyle. I don't
Child.
know, child. Its general analyzation referred to above, and as the self-existent living notion, it is thus no less a disjunctive activity which rids itself of this process, draws away from its anger toward the object. Hang on just a sec.
Oh, it's part of the digestion process. Yep.
So yeah,
So child is basically like the part of the digestion, like nutrition process, so it's already extracted nutrition and it's passing it to the
yeah,
rest of the body. That's the fat part of that is child. So yeah, I was just thinking is it wins nothing but nutrition is what I get out of that.
yeah, yeah. So he's talking about eating and what it gives the animal organism.
Yep.
And then he goes into his Zuzats talking about talking about the science of diet, nutrition, so forth, transition and transformation that all chemical and mechanical explanations founder and in which they find their limit, or such explanations take into account only those data which are already externally similar, which makes sense, right? Yeah. The truth is rather that the two sides exist in complete freedom from each other. Bread has in its own self no connection with the body. Yeah.
I was looking at the same trying to find the definition of life when it's change when it's part of the process, yeah.
Yeah. If I here we go. If I decompose a salt, I obtain again the two substances of which it is composed. The salt, therefore, um, is thereby explained, and the substances have not become something else in the salt, but have remained the same. In the organism, however, this becoming something else on the part of non-organic substances is made explicit, because the non-organic being is only a sublated moment in the organic self. It has to be taken into account not as what it immediately is, but as what it is in its notion. But in its notion, it is the same as organic being. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Mm-hmm. Are you? All right, hey.
First, I'm like thinking at what point in the process does the materials and labor become the commodity? So that I'm just kind of maybe think a little bit kind of like what you could ask the question, what point in the production process does the materials and labor become the commodity?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same thing because if you decompose some of the raw material, right, like the linen, and like you pull it apart to make it just like, well, not the linen. If you pull apart the coat, you're left with ruined linen and strings, right? And there it is. But if you um if you use the coat to uniform your workforce, uh, then you have a company that does something bigger as a bigger whole, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, because
Like,
it's yeah, I guess it is reproducing itself, right? By making a commodity that keeps it gaining nutrition and money.
well, the use of, say, the uniform in the military service, um, if you take a blue coat and put a couple symbols on it, you digest what was just an ordinary coat and turned it into a symbol of the organization. Um, and of course, that's an ideal. determination, but at the same time, it sort of um, it sort of recasts the same argument that Hegel gives with the salt in an organic setting to something material in an organizational setting, right? Yeah, that's what I was going for. The coat was assimilated into the military services, and it's something very different than just some random coat that's, worth maybe $5 at um uh Goodwill. Now it's probably worth several $100s with all those things on it, and required to be worn. This is exhibited in organic assimilation. Yeah, exactly. Food. Yeah. So it goes down. It teaches us all about food and assimilation and how the body's non-organic parts are used to assimilate um, the outside object into what essentially is the animal object, which is a very different process um, from what the external stuff is doing. Nutrition, various scales of animals and life. Mm, yeah, there's a lot of science here, accumulated science on what's going on with digestion. Drinks are digested in two ways: assimilation, and the different ways that assimilation looks like,
Also,
especially
the
when
other thing
someone
is
drinks
like
something.
allegedly eating asparagus gives that odor within a few minutes of ingestion, allegedly.
Yeah.
I mean, it does show kind of how it becomes part of the whole. It's already
Hmm.
spread out. The food has become its own thing to being the animal.
Mm. Ugh. Dog vomit. Gross. Bile. I'm eating here, damn it.
I didn't say
Um,
anything.
yeah. The final product of digestion is chyle, and this is the same as the animal lymph, into which the animal organism in its immediate operation transforms what is offered to it or what is it offers to itself. Blah blah blah. Chemical analysis of the bile. Okay. Main point is that the organism, although exercising a mediative, distinctive activity, nonetheless remains in its universality, while at the same time its outward turned action is chemical. Just as crystals, when fractured, reveal their characteristic inner formation as a particular mode of their existence. Because the animal is involved in a struggle with the outer world, its relation to the latter is untrue, since this outer world has already been transformed in principle by the power of the animal lymph. Okay. Hmm.
Okay, the notion of digestion, therefore, is that after its mediating process has merely explicated what has already existed in principle, the triumph over the food which has entered the atmosphere of the living animal. It's literally the last paragraph there.
Yeah.
Uh, the organism, returning into itself out of the opposition, now concludes by laying hold of comprehending itself, phenomena corresponding to this notion which have already been mentioned. Turning to itself out of the yeah, okay. It's there this is just definition of assimilation. It's making the other a
Hmm.
yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
Through this process of assimilation, therefore, the animal, no board jokes, the animal becomes in a real way for itself,
Hmm.
or by recognizing itself as the main differences of animal length and bio into its behavior towards the individual thing itself. It has proved itself to be an animal individual. And by the negation of its other, it has posited itself as subjectivity, a real being for self.
Hmm.
Yeah, at this point, I guess assimilation is the point by which an animal becomes for itself. Yeah, it's probably the most obvious example of that here so far. Right, the self-relation is immediately a direction of division of itself, and the organism is constituting itself as subjectivity is immediately a repelling of itself from itself. Oh, we're back to all those terminology. Nature of organism is to produce itself as something external to itself. Like the plant which in its differentiation breaks itself into parts, the animal too differentiates itself, but with this difference, that the self-subsistent being from which the animal distinguishes itself is posited near, not merely something external, but also is identical with the animal. So we're viewing it from the other side. Okay. So we had from the animal's perspective, it's taking something external and making it itself. The other side is a direction where the something external to itself is repelled from itself because it's like
Yeah.
double
He's
negation.
talking
Yeah.
about what, where things go in and where things go out.
So he is actually flipping to
Yeah.
that. I didn't know if it was either of the two.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Excretion,
The form of
etc.
attract, formal repulsion, three, the
Yep.
constructive instinct, and now the propagation of the species.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. In, out.
Yep, and then it says it right there. Animal's abstract repulsion of itself by which it makes itself external to itself is excretion. Okay.
The conclusion of the process of
That's
assimilation.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't get this part where he says disgusted with itself for not having more self-confidence.
What it does when it abandons the struggle, rids itself of the bile which it has discharged. The latter something is itself non-organic to itself, an abstract. Otherwise, the animal is not identical with itself. Or has no other significance than this. The organism, recognizing its error, gets rid of its entanglement with outside things, and thus is confirmed by the chemical composition of the excrement. Trying to explain, I guess, how like it gets disgusted with it's I guess kind of connecting that we excrete junk is something that we've rejected of ourselves to the external world.
Right.
And that's the lack of
It is it's
self-confidence. Yeah.
it it's kind of weird to talk about how the body wasn't able to digest everything and turn it into building blocks for the body to keep as a lack of self-confidence.
Yeah, that's what I
That's
was
I'm
sure of.
I'm like, what? Okay. Is that supposed to be a German idiom of some kind? I have no idea. I took a shit. I abandoned the struggle. Is that what he's trying? I don't know.
He is literally talking about ingestion and the
Yeah.
more,
Hmm.
yeah, stuff that you did couldn't ingest. It literally that's the self-confident. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And
might
then he
be.
goes down, and
Yeah,
then he goes down to talk about the chemical composition of everything that was rejected and why. Which I'm like, okay. No, 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 no. Same thing, same thing. Bile, pancreatic juice, blah, blah, blah. The understanding. Okay. The understanding will always hold to the mediations as such, regarding them as external relationships, mechanical and chemical in nature, but they are nonetheless subordinate in comparison with freed vitality and self-feeling. The understanding pretends to know more than speculative philosophy and loftily looks down on it, but it remains confined within the sphere of finite mediation, and vitality as such is beyond its grasp. Basically, sort of, yeah. Um, sort of wrapping up the discussion there on assimilation and how the understanding holds the parts of the process discretely apart, whereas the notion understands them both apart and together, uh, in both of those capacities, I guess you could say. Yay, we got to the constructive instinct. Woo! Um, which we still have around 40 something pages to go. And it's 8:46. Um, hmm. Do you guys want to knock off early since
that's fine.
the this gets into a whole thing, and we might just want to read it early so that we can just sort of run it down when we get together next week.
Yeah, I mean, I purposely took today off because I had to work 7 days in a row before this, so I'm kind of recuperating.
Nice. Yeah. No, I get it. Ugh. Okay, cool. Well, we'll read from the constructive instinct on download. Let's see how long this baby is. Uh, huh. So it goes down and includes the process of the genus. Um, let's see how long the sex um relation is. Genus and species. Yeah, this gets into reproduction, the reproduction of the organism. And why don't we read from whatever page that was? Oh, try to read all the way to the end because we're in the last like 20 pages.
Yeah.
But whatever you don't read, we're going to review anyway next time and see if we can get to the end within one or two meetings. And then we can see where we go from there. Uh, okay. Have a good night, comrades.
Right.
Rest up.